Welcome to In the News, Conversations Around Security, a new and dynamic podcast where we dissect the day's headlines through the critical lens of security risk management and where awareness meets analysis. Join us on the 1st and 15th of each month as we bring you a fresh episode packed with informative debates, expert analysis, and thought-provoking insights offering a nuanced perspective on the stories that shape our world. So buckle up and join us for a look at what's in the news, conversations around security. Hello, folks, and welcome to In the News, Conversations Around Security. I think I got it right this time, Brian. I know I've had trouble the last few weeks with that. But we are on to our next podcast, and today's session is going to be talking about something that's relevant to everybody's lives, certainly in the Toronto area, and that is these encampments. We've got encampments on everything. Encampments about Gaza, encampments about schools, encampments about the homeless, you name it. Everybody's just setting up shop wherever they want in the city, and nothing seems to be getting done about it. They exist, they're growing, and they pose a security risk, real risk, not just to the people who are in those encampments, but also people in and around those areas. And I think that we're going to talk about some of those risks, and I think some of the listeners will probably be a little surprised at what's been found and what's been going on and some of the rumors of what's been said and being done in those encampments. And Brian, over to you. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Luke. I think it's very topical. I think the encampment problem across Canada, certainly in Toronto, is being felt now by a lot of people. If you're looking at the pro-Palestine encampments as an example, that's spilling over into all sorts of other things, making life difficult for day-to-day Torontonians to live their lives. Then you got the typical stuff that we've been dealing with for years: the homelessness, the drug use, the safe injection site spillover problems. This is really not only affecting the quality of life in downtown Toronto, but it's starting to impact business and operations. The bottom line for venue operators in protecting people and their property.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody wants to come to a city where they're going to have their children or their family exposed to these types of encampments. I don't even know what the word, I don't want to say undesirables, but quite frankly, that's what they are, right? Like nobody wants to see that kind of crap. I certainly don't want to see it on a Friday night or a Saturday night when I go out with my wife the one time a week that we're able to get out of the house type thing. And I know because I hear from our tenants and our customers in my day job that people are worried. They do not feel safe walking in and around those places. And some of the things that I'm hearing, that I've heard from the police, and I've seen reports and I've read the media reports on weapons caches being found in some of these encampments. There was one in Edmonton where the weapons cache that they found, I mean, a SEAL team would have been proud to own those types of weapons. You know, like it's crazy the kind of stuff that's been allowed to fester and build in these areas. And we haven't even touched on the sexual assaults, assaults in general, probably the high level of thefts that go on in these areas, the high presence of EV batteries, right? A lot of them use scooters and bicycles that are EV powered, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, they're having fires in some of these encampments. And those things, I'm sure you've seen some of the videos online. They start like so quickly, and now you're in a tent. Can you imagine how quickly that fire would spread if we get a really bad one night?
Well, listen, I think, there's not all encampments are alike, and the rationale or reason why people are intense or sort of defying the social norm are varied. But basically, I think it really comes down to is that there's sort of a breakdown in rule of law, or at least social norms. And what used to be unheard of just a few years ago now is common. And you've got this epic battle, whether it's the pro-Palestine thing or homeless encampments, between the left and the right, between the people that say, well, you know what, we have to look the other way. People aren't as fortunate as others. They're not willing to do anything, but rather than supply them with tents and be out there in the wintertime. And you got the other extreme that are saying, just clear them out, and just put them all in jail. And there's got to be a compromise that we find somewhere. My big concern is the thing that really has me agitated is that the encampments that we're dealing with now, a lot of them related to the pro-Palestinian movement, the political type stuff that's happening, is really not just disruptive and an eyesore, but it's a real danger. Yeah. It's a danger not only to the people in the immediate area, but it also is legitimizing hate against a certain identifiable group.
Yep, absolutely.
And my real concern is that I think a lot of people, certainly a lot of the protesters, they might be, I'm sure they think they're sincere, but they're ill-informed. I think that protest movement has been hijacked by professional agitators. I think there's geopolitical forces at play, and I think young people are being taken advantage of. But I think my biggest disappointment and concern with what we see in Toronto and Canadian cities is if you're angry with things that are happening thousands of miles away, how is that impacting us here in Canada? How is a Jewish school here in Canada, or how's a person trying to go to university your enemy? What have they done to you? We've got to get a handle on this type of thing because it's just going to tear apart the social fabric of our cities. And it's really impacting, as I said earlier, the quality of life and business. Yeah. There's a cost to all this stuff. I mean, commercial venue operators and property operators in the world that you live in, they have to police against this. They have to increase their security costs. All the police overtime, all the redeployment of police officers. I mean, in Toronto, we've talked about before the poor response times. The association talked about a 26-minute response for priority one calls. What's happening now when you've got 150 cops redeployed to babysit a bunch of protesters?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't sustainable.
Yeah, and they're not working the next day. Like, okay, so we're paying them, they're being paid for their time, but they're not capable of, you can't be a cop 24/7 for 3-4 days in a row. It's just not feasible. So there's an impact in addition to the money. It's, to your point, service. They may be scheduled for a shift, and they're going to have to call in sick because they just work 12 hours, babysitting these sites. So yeah, absolutely an issue there. I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned when you were talking about the, who's behind this type of stuff. And I know that we talked about foreign interference on a previous episode, but we talked about foreign interference in terms of elections and menace and messing with our government. But here we have it. It's again that foreign interference. But I think it was Iran that posted online, or they were on social media raving about the great work that our encampment students were doing, supporting their cause. So that to me is again another form of foreign influence impacting the way we're operating in this country and ultimately affecting our security risk profile, right? The safety of our citizens and our fabric of our society.
Well, and we're not talking about foreign interference per se, but I can't help but segue into it. Just the other day that you had Elizabeth May from the Green Party saying that she read the classified CSIS document. There's nothing to see here, folks. And Jagmeet Singh the next day read it, and he says he's really concerned. I think we had a guest, Al Trednak, a former CSIS manager, on a few weeks ago or a few podcasts ago, and he was talking about the lack of a security or intelligence culture in this country. We're incredibly naive and we're being manipulated, and we don't realize we're being manipulated. If you look at all the Western countries right now, they're grappling with this. Somehow, what's happened is our quality of life has been hijacked by people that have other agendas. Yeah. If you truly care, if we bring it back to the pro-Palestinian issues, if you truly care about what's happening in Palestine, and I certainly do, I also care what's happening in Israel, how is what you're doing helping? It's really not helping. You're not getting people supporting you. I mean, if you really want to make change or be heard, I don't know that this is the way to do it.
I think the majority of the public is genuinely fed up with this type of interference with their daily lives. We have enough issues in this city to worry about than to worry about others as well. Even though, yeah, it's a concern. Absolutely. Nobody condones killing people in general, let alone, children and women and all the rest of that. But to your point, what are we doing? What are you doing about it here? Yelling and screaming and sitting your ass down on a university campus and stopping those legitimate students from going to have their graduation. They've paid their dues. They've worked their ass off to celebrate an achievement. And now their family has to walk by your stupid tent. I don't understand what their end game is. But I do understand, because to your point, I agree. They are not here to argue about Gaza. It's bigger than that. They're here to change our society. They're here to target our way of life. And Canadians are too freaking naive to acknowledge that. And I will put the first blame on our leaders, because they're the ones who should be smarter, saying this has got to stop, this has got to change. And instead they condone it, they cater to it, and they contribute to divisive politics.
Yeah, they don't understand that their actions or inactions really are emboldening. And I just lost my thoughts, so say something.
Okay, let's go to a commercial.
Okay, let's go to a commercial.
Hey folks, if you're concerned about the security of your business, look no further than Brian Clayman and Associates. With its stable of experienced advisors and certified professionals, Brian Clayman and Associates provides tailored security solutions to help protect what matters most to you. Don't wait until disaster strikes. Give Brian Clayman and Associates a call today and take the first step towards a more secure future. When it comes to security, trust the experts. And now back to the podcast. All right, folks, we're back, and hopefully Brian's got his wits about him again, and we can pick up where we left off. Brian?
Well, if you would have done as my producer what I said, if we had a 3-minute commercial, I would have had a better chance to get my wits back and remember what it is I was talking about. But I guess I'll change directions a little bit.
All right.
To your point, I think that there are bigger things at play over here, and I think that people really have to smarten up and realize that they are being used, that they're being pawns. I can't tell you how many times I've seen on different social media when they're interviewing people and they're asking them, why is this genocide, or why is Israel a terrorist, or like people do not, as terrorist state. People do not have a sense of history. Yeah. Douglas Murray, who's a very outspoken and incredible journalist, British journalist, like he was saying, the problem is that people do not understand the history of the region. It's a very complex history, and it didn't start on October 7th, and it didn't start in 1948. Yeah. It's very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and unless you look at it in the totality, you're really not going to understand. And what seems to happen in this movement is not looking at the facts. You're not looking at the complexities. The reality is, okay, if you truly care about the plight of Palestinians, okay, if Hamas really, really cared about the death and destruction, they wouldn't have military installations in the city. They would return the hostages. They would leave Gaza and go to some Arab or European capital where they would have sanctuary, but they don't. If Israel's terrible, you take away, you give back the hostages and you take away the threat, they have no moral authority to continue prosecuting the war. And quite honestly, they don't want to. I mean, just think about this logically. It's a nation of citizen soldiers. The economy is impacted. People aren't at work. Yeah. They're not doing their jobs. They've been called up to military actions. Yeah. They're not winning in this. No one is winning in this. Yeah. Palestine, the Palestinians are bound into the Stone Ages. Like, no one is winning. The only people winning are the Islamists, and we're playing into it. That's what kills me. And you talk about our politicians. When you had the synagogue that was shot up in Toronto last week, and then you had a similar type thing in Montreal a few days later, and all the politicians condemned it and said, we got to do something about this. Okay, well, who's going to do it? And what are we going to do? I mean, I can't understand when I hear, and I like Doug Ford, but when I hear the provincial government say, our premier says that this isn't who we are, we're not going to tolerate this. I check mark that. Yeah. I agree. This isn't who we are. Okay. And we're going to do everything we can to keep our community safe. Okay. So the courts now are hearing the injunction that the University of Toronto has asked for, and that takes 2.5 weeks. Why isn't the premier and the prime minister telling the court, clear your fucking calendar and get this done right away? I mean, it's just a lot of platitudes coming from everyone. And the people that are trying to break our democracy and take advantage of our charter, they're playing into this. They're emboldened. They love it.
Yeah, they, I saw pictures this week, social media, with some of these protesters carrying swastikas and marching through Jewish businesses and making themselves known, tearing down flags and things like that. And everyone says, let's not over equate it to what happened in the 1940s, 38s, 39s, but that's what it is. Like, that's what they were doing then. There's no difference. And the response was the same. People sat on the sidelines saying, well, it's those people, right? And then what happens? Those people became everybody else. So to your point, I mean, we talked about that before, right? They come for you on a Saturday, and then they will come for the rest on Sunday. And that's what people here need to understand.
I think we have to understand that, whether you like the Jews or you don't like the Jews or whatever, they are the canaries in the coal mine. And if you really take the time to understand radical Islam, not Islam, but radical Islam and jihadists, okay? It's about having Sharia law and Islamic law throughout the world. They don't like us. They don't like the way we live. Yeah. And we are, it is just boggles my mind how the Western youth, okay, have gone hook, line, and sinker, and they're supporting what's terrorist organizations, terrorist thought. If you look at the recent March for Israel that took place last week, they say it's the largest in its history, 50,000 people. There were no calls for hate. There was no calls for death to Palestinians. There was no calls for divisions. I mean, it is so glaring to me that one side is not about peace or living in harmony. really it comes down to the elimination of what they perceive as the enemy. And if you understand the history, if you take the time, you realize that's not the truth. There's a reason why, Gaza was occupied. There's a reason that there's a border there. It wasn't always there. It was in response to the attacks that came there.
I think
So,
even if you take the terrorism out of it and you just leave it for what it is in terms of what they stand for, it still doesn't make sense. Why do women support a movement that would have them in friggin', hijabs covered head to toe and not competing in sports and not going to school and becoming educated? Why does the gay community support a movement that would have them thrown off buildings or hung off lampshades? Like, I just don't get that mentality. So even if you took that terrorism out of it, it still doesn't make sense why these people are naively following that path. That just blows my mind.
well, I think that, part of the problem is it's our education system. People don't learn history. People don't learn political science. They don't understand the complex geopolitical natures of the world. Ask your kids, ask about world history. If you don't, history is cyclical, nothing new. It repeats itself. It always has repeated itself. This cancel culture, for example, young Dundas Square. Okay, well, Dundas was a bad guy. Why? Because he was part of the slave trade. Well, back then, everyone was part of the slave trade. Doesn't make it right, but that was the norm then. George Washington had slaves. He was a benevolent slave owner, but he had slaves. This cancel culture is a problem because if we don't acknowledge our past and the things we did right and most of the things we did wrong, we're going to repeat it. We're going to repeat ourselves. And that's where we find ourselves now, because every time I look at an interview on social media where someone is trying to interview one of these protesters and they try and get into really the history and the dynamics of what's happening and what's led to the protesters, many of them, I dare say most, are ill-informed.
Yeah.
They truly are. Like, there's some, honestly, that know what they're saying and they're spinning it for their side, whatever that side is. But there's many, when you say river to the sea, what river are we talking about? They have no idea.
Yeah, it's the Yellow River.
The St. Lawrence Seaway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's gonna come apart. It's starting to come apart. I'm starting to see signs of people getting fed up and starting to push back. Whether it's in the right direction remains to be seen. But I think it's going to get a lot uglier before it gets better. When you talk about schooling, man, like my daughter came home from school this week. They spent the class talking about World War II and World War One. It was sort of like a Cole's Notes by the sounds of it. And my daughter's a woman, obviously she's female, and she said, "Dad, all they talked about was the role of women in both wars." And then somebody said, "Well, okay, they were working in factories, yes, but why were they working in factories? Because the guys were all dying on the beaches." Like, can we at least acknowledge that was going on, other than just say that women did this, did that, and everything that they did great? Yeah, they contributed, absolutely, but it seems to be so narrowly focused on whatever the agenda of the day is, whatever that teacher seems to be focused on, and they don't talk anything else about, what were the conditions that contributed to that, what led to it. Those are the things that are going to lead us, that are leading us to where we are today with these encampments. A stalemate, no one's got the courage to push back, and eventually it's going to blow up.
And the lack of history, because history gives you perspective. I saw an interview on British TV where there was a protest organizer being interviewed, and the interviewer asked the person about a particular day that just happened last week, D-Day. And he asked the person, what is the significance of that date? And the person didn't have an idea. Then he said, okay, well, what is the significance of D-Day? And the protest organizer that's protesting the genocide and the fact that the British government is complicit in it had no idea, never heard of D-Day, never knew of the sacrifice that took place. And when asked about all the people that died during World War II following D-Day and the carpet bombings, they weren't aware of that. They didn't know that existed. I mean, what's happening is we've got an ill-informed demographic right now that think they're reinventing the world. The world didn't start today.
Yeah.
The world started a long time ago, and the peace we've enjoyed, and the people of this generation and the past generation, actually for the last, what is it now, 60 years, 70 years, the peace dividend we've enjoyed, anomaly.
Yep.
Anomaly. I shouldn't be drinking when I'm doing the podcast, because in the history of mankind, there's never been a period of peace. This is not normal, but these people, young people, they don't realize that. They think this is normal.
They don't have a clue. And, I'm not going to blame them. We're the ones who are teaching them, right? Like, our generation taught them that, so we have that blame to take. But when you hear famous singers, a real famous one that I think I've told you about, I see her being interviewed, and she talks about how COVID was so hard for her that she could relate to the men on Normandy Beach storming the beachfront. I'm like,
Oh
this
my
is
God.
out to lunch, like not a freaking. And there's your, like, she's one of the most popular people out there. Who are they going to follow? Who are they going to listen to? They're going to listen to her. They ain't going to listen to a professor, some boring guy at a university who knows his history. They're going to listen to her, and she has
Yeah,
no
because she,
clue.
because she's an influencer. She
Yeah,
doesn't know anything. I mean, it really is an incredible marketing blitz campaign. Look at who many of these influencers are: actors, actresses,
yeah,
YouTube stars. Like that's your credentials.
yeah,
I mean, when you look at guys, and people that know what they're talking about, and historians and experts, they've got years and years and years of serious study. Even those that I don't agree with, their politics might be different. At least so they're forming an opinion
yeah.
based on an analysis of what happened before. The world didn't start on October 7th. I mean, it really comes down to what the focus is. It's not about social justice. It's about a hate of Israel, which is the coal mine and the canary in the coal mine. And it really is a people that are disrupting our way of life and causing all sorts of social and economic upheaval
Yeah.
based on a lack of understanding. When I look at media reports of how the police have been dealing with this type of disruptive activity in Europe, they're not fucking around.
Yeah.
They're not messing around. And the Americans, I was watching last night, I think it was in San Fernando or San Francisco, somewhere in the States, they were clearing up the encampment, and they're saying the police are brutal. They were giving the demonstrators every opportunity to leave, ask them to leave. They wouldn't leave. Well, if you break the law, the way it works in a free society, the police have legal authority to remove you, and that's what's happening.
Yeah. It's sort of like claiming that you're being starved to death when you put yourself in that situation and you're free to leave. How can you complain that you're not getting food? Like it's so absurd, and we cater to that shit.
And they claim that you're a freedom fighter. You're not. You're a spoiled kid who's getting catered with Uber Eats that are
Yeah,
delivering to your campsite every night.
yeah, and they're university kids, so I'm going to guess the majority of them don't come from a very difficult life. They've probably had it pretty easy, and so they consider themselves some kind of freedom fighter or martyr. I don't know, but I think the reality check is coming. If you look at Europe, like you said, I mean, the rise of the right is certainly on the march after the last elections. Like everywhere you look, people are fed up with the touchy-feely crap. And hopefully we don't swing so far right that we got other problems. But the correction is coming. It's going to, because people who just want to live life, be left alone, go to work, pay their bills, and then have a drink on a Saturday night, those people are starting to voice their opinions, and it's not, they're not going to accept this crap anymore.
Well, to bring it back, I guess, to what does it mean to our day-to-day life in Toronto and like the security industry, protection of assets and people. As a security consultant, I've never been busier than I have been in the last 6 months. And I can tell you, I've got faith-based clients, I've got corporate clients that are spending money like they've never spent before, not because they want to, because they have to.
Yeah.
And there's a limit, like this money that's being spent on policing, on security, on consultants could go to other more productive things. Now, it's really good for me because it helps me pay the bills and everything like that. But if you just multiply that against not just the private sector, but the public sector, about the policing costs, about all these other costs, it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think someone's going to have to do something soon, because my fear, quite honestly, is that when people lose faith in the ability of government to protect them and to do the right thing, they take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see the
That's what we're
examples.
starting to see. Absolutely.
That's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. And we haven't even talked about, I know we're running short on time, but we haven't even talked about the cost. You mentioned business. We talk about the public paying the cops. Okay. But how much, how much money is being spent by little businesses cleaning up graffiti, wiping up shit that's been left on the stairs, pee stains on their property, things that are being stolen from these people who, they got to make a nickel or something. They can't live in an encampment and not bringing cash of some sort. So they got to be doing some of that stuff, right? And those are all costs that nobody talks about. It's on nobody's radar, but the businesses are stuck paying it regardless.
And I want to be really clear, because someone watching this podcast may say, oh, these guys, they're just pro-Israel, they're just this or just that. It really comes down to, I'm a big proponent of free speech. And I don't care whether or not you agree with me or disagree with me. Knock your socks off. But free speech crosses a line when it goes into intimidation and hatred. We got to put a stop to that.
That's a reflection of the society we live in. We are an immature society. When you are unable to have an adult conversation with somebody who has an opposing point of view, and have that discussion openly and honestly, regardless of what is said. To your point, I believe in free speech 100%. You don't like me because I'm my Italian background, call me what you want, at least I know, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather have the knowledge to know why, and then I have an opportunity to educate, maybe change your opinion. At the end of the day, I know where you stand. But this bullshit that our social society certainly invites, this notion that let's all pretend we're all happy, virtue signal to the cows come home, and underneath there's this steaming, boiling pot of water that's just ready to blow up at any second. That's what I see happening here.
Yeah, I mean, we have to come back to the basics. We need to talk to each other. It's bad enough we don't like each other, but we will never have a chance of liking each other if we can't even talk to each other. When you and I were downtown in the financial district, part of that security and policing community, we took the approach that although we may have been competitors on a business level, security, we have to talk to each other. We have common interests. And that's what the dialogue is. We've got to find the common interest. I mean, if you look at the Israeli-Palestinian thing, I think a common thing is that Israelis want to live in peace and raise their kids in peace, and Palestinians want to raise their kids in peace, and they want to have education and opportunities. So let's start there.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, I know we could talk for hours on this. We have. I know it's a very touchy subject for a lot of people, but we managed to talk about it. We've got opposing views, and we're still friends. So hopefully, the so-called leaders of our city and our nation will figure that out as well, and come and have the courage to step forward and set the example. But we're trying to get a guest for the next episode, right?
Yeah, we are. And I just want to go back to something saying that, we there's a lot of things we agree on. And there's some things we really don't agree on, and we're still friends. I mean, those are nice words, but can you sort of define friend? Because I tolerate you, but a friend, that's a very strong word. But you know what? I think you are my friend.
We agree to disagree.
We agree to disagree. And honestly, we gotta have a laugh on it. I mean, I get some things right, you get more things right type thing, and you
True.
I'm trying to make a point. You got to respect each other. And, it's a really simple rule. If you just look at how we interact with our family and friends, we got to do that societally.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to do that in communities. And once we do that and we're empathetic, I think the world has a chance, but we got a lot of work to get there. I don't really see change in the near future. I think, we got to sort of crash and burn before you rebuild. It's like a fire. You got to put out the forest fire before the forest can regenerate itself. Unfortunately, I think the fire is still not under control, and we got work ahead of us.
And with that, I'm going to sign off for this episode, folks. If you like our show, please leave us a like or comment. Appreciate you guys listening, and anything you can do to help us would certainly help keep us talking and doing the show. So with that, talk to you later.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Hey folks, if you're concerned about the security of your business, look no further than Brian Clayman and Associates. With its stable of experienced advisors and certified professionals, Brian Clayman and Associates provides tailored security solutions to help protect what matters most to you. Don't wait until disaster strikes. Give Brian Clayman and Associates a call today and take the first step towards a more secure future. When it comes to security, trust the experts. And now back to the podcast.